Welcome to this episode of the ASMG Back Pass. We've missed a couple of weekends, so it's time to play a little bit of catch up. And we're going to go over the premier results from the past few weeks and see how the races are going. The playoffs are just around the corner, so we want to kind of catch you up so you can prepare for the games coming up on the weekend. And we'll see what you need to be looking forward to and see what the races are for the relegation fight. Those teams that are trying to stay away from the cellar of the division, and also the workings for the playoffs, what surprises from some of the players are there, and also who is in the lead for the individual division titles in both the North and the South. And we'll start by looking at the North Division, look at the games and the results from there. We start with the rare Friday night game in Chattanooga with the Red Wolves 2, who are hosting Portoros FC. Now, Portoros FC, of course, are the defending champions. However, they've had a torrid season so far this season. We'll look at their position in the league table later after we cover these results. But they failed to really get started this season, and there's going to be a lot of work they're going to have to do in the offseason to repair things. But right now, with this loss, this 2-0 loss to the Red Wolves, it puts them in sort of a precarious position in the table. And but for the Red Wolves themselves, they started out the season very slowly. Didn't really, they had a delay to getting started in the season, but then they started off with a couple of losses. But since that time, they've really put it together and come up and with a real challenge to go for the division title and possibly beyond that. So definitely a team to keep an eye on. This is a team that has a first team that's in the UPSL 2 division. And so this one is full of players who are trying to make a message to the coaches that, hey, you know, we deserve to have an opportunity in that first team too. So that's the incentive for these players. But also now they have that incentive of getting that division title in their first chance of asking in the Georgia North. So that was the first game that came up on the weekend in the North. The second one, Atlanta Fire United FC drew with Scenic City SC. Somewhat of an upset here when you consider the position of these teams in the league table. Scenic City right there with Red Wolves challenging for top spot in the North. They actually have a date against the Red Wolves next week. And it could be one of those title deciding games. So there's something to really take a look at and look forward to see what can happen. But for Atlanta Fire United, this was a very valuable point because they had a forfeit earlier in the season that put them on negative points, believe it or not. Then they did get a victory and now a draw, and that brings them back up in the challenge to get out of the relegation spot, which is where they are right now. They're in that bottom spot, but this draw actually gives them an opportunity, depending on what happens in the last two games that they have in the season, to maybe fight themselves out of that position, because one of the teams they have to play is another rival that's also fighting against relegation, and that of course is the Soccer Saves Lives, SSL, who are also struggling this season. We'll take a look at their results as well. But this 2-2 victory, kind of a setback for Scenic City, but they're still in the hunt for the division title. Atlanta Fire gives themselves a lifeline with this draw. So again, a team that you're going to have to take a look at as they desperately look for a way to get out of the cellar of the Georgia North Division. The next game that we come up with is Soccer Saves Lives, who are hosting FC Birmingham. This is what we're talking about with Soccer Saves Lives. The big story with them is Yusuf Samuel was removed as head coach of the team after a poor run of form for Soccer Saves Lives, most notably the 8-0 shellacking they got at Georgia Impact, a game where I think only 9 players showed up for that match. And that is below the standards of the KSA Academy, who birthed this team, Soccer Saves Lives. And so there was a big change that was needed. Osai Tomasi has come back as the head coach. He's going to be an interim head coach to the end of the season. And his sole purpose is going to be to try to keep Soccer Saves Lives from being relegated. And that's the whole thing with them. But we'll look at the table in a moment, and you'll see what the big deal is there with that. And then, of course, FC Birmingham, valuable win for them. They, too, were struggling against the idea of relegation, but they made themselves safe with this victory and actually has an outside chance at a playoff spot. So big victory for them. A brace from Terrell Price and two great goals that you might have seen on the ASMG broadcast. So valuable win for them. Devastating loss for Soccer Saves Lives, and it is also a result that I think Atlanta Fire were very happy to see, because this is their rival as they both fight themselves out of that relegation position. Last game in the North that we're going to consider is going to be the match at Meadow Creek Stadium between LSA Mustangs, who were hosting Pachuca, Georgia. This was another game that was on ASMG Broadcasting with Larry Weaver giving the call on that one. Valuable win for LSA Mustangs. They're looking for their first ever division title as well. So they're getting there neck and neck with the Red Wolves and up there at the top of the table. And this keeps them with pace with this. It also puts them ahead of Scenic City, who, of course, dropped those points with the draw with Atlanta Fire. So this is a great win for them, probably the win of the season for them, against a very good Pachuca, Georgia side who are really kind of in a slump right now. They really haven't performed like you would expect them to do after their season last season, where they made the playoffs, and they also put out Portros FC, who were the division title holders at the time. And so it's a very young team that Ricardo Montoya has that he's working with. They're producing the future stars of tomorrow. But being young in a very competitive division like this, you can get these kind of dips in form where you struggle. And that's what's happened to Pachuca. But they still have an opportunity at a playoff spot. So we'll have to see what happens with the penultimate weekend coming up as we get to the last two games of the season. We're going to take a look at the division table. And of course, as we said before, Chattanooga Red Wolves, they have really turned it on since they had slow start to the early part of the season. They now top the division with 2 games to play. With 18 points. Right behind them is LSA Mustangs on 17. Scenic City, we're telling you about that draw has dropped them. They were in a first place tie with Chattanooga, those two Chattanooga teams. And so it's a 3-horse race right there. Georgia Impact not far behind them. And everybody in the division, of course, you see is on 8 points. And just so you know, with that logjam at the top, just a reminder that the tiebreaker, if these guys end up on the same amount of points, then of course the tiebreaker is going to be head to head. And so you're going to look at the results through the season, see how they did against each other. If it's still tied after that, then it goes to goal difference that's between the teams now. And so those tiebreakers, they might come into play not only for the league title, but also for playoff places and also the relegation fight. And so as we go down the list here, also the reminder, the top 4 teams are the teams that are going to make the playoffs. And so in the first place team also qualifies, the team that wins the playoffs qualifies to go on to play a qualifying game against the South Division. And the winner of that game will go on to the national tournament of 32. So it's a lot to play for. The division title, playoffs, you're fighting against relegation. So even with 2 games to play in this division, there's so many places that could go up or down. Relegation can swap places. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we've gone down, you see where Pachuca, Georgia is. They're going to need some help if they're going to get into that final playoff spot. But they still have that outside chance. So does FC Birmingham. Now, the other thing you're looking at, though, are those goal difference amounts there. And Georgia Impact has the best one of those top 5 or 6 spots there. So that's going to be in their favor. And as we go on down, we talked about Portros FC on 7 points. Mathematically, still in danger of a relegation spot if Atlanta Fire catches fire. but they're probably going to be safe, not going to make the playoffs, but they're going to have, this is going to be sort of a year they're going to have to look at to rebuild for the fall season coming up. And so that's an interesting story there. I mean, the fortunes have really turned sour for them this season, but there's a lot of talent there. There's some great coaching at Portuguese, so I'm sure they'll turn things around for the next season. We'll keep an eye on that. And the big story at the bottom of the division, of course, Soccer Saves Lives on 3 points, Atlanta Fire United on 2 points. And what's really interesting about that is Atlanta Fire had a forfeit where they had some college players that were not available for a game, and they had to forfeit a game. With that forfeit, they were deducted 3 points. So if had they not had that issue, they would now be in 8th spot if the other results had remained the same, and Soccer Saves Lives would be in the relegation spot. So they hurt themselves there, and that's the one thing we always say. You know, when you're building a club, especially in the UPSL, a lot of times if you're relying on college players, you have to remember that their college eligibility and priority is above a lot of time the league action that they're playing in the pro development league. So if you do have college players, you want to make sure that you have backup, maybe an academy that could come in and replace these players when they have their college responsibilities to follow. But that's the one thing that has hurt them there. But they still have that option, have 2 games to do something about it. And what's more importantly, their last game is going to be against Soccer Saves Lives. So that could be a relegation game to look forward to. So that kind of covers it for the North Division. And we'll get over to the South Division now to look at how that picture shows up on the other side of the conference. So we'll start with one of the big games of the 3 from the South Division of the Georgia Conference. And of course, Georgia Revolution, who were hosting Kalonji Pro Profile at Old Warhawk Stadium. And Kalonji Pro Profile came out 4-0 winners. And this is of the games, they've only been scored on once all season so far after 6 matches. And it's an incredible performance for them so far. In their history in the Georgia Conference, I think this is the best start they've had to a season. They do have some games in hand, but right now, despite that, they're at the top of the table, and we'll look at that in just a moment. Disappointing result for Georgia Revolution. In fact, Kalonji Pro Profile had a red card with their captain, Kamani Irving, for an altercation early in that match. And despite that, they still were able to put 4 goals on Georgia Revolution. Revolution just could not get going enough. It was a very scrappy game and a game worthy of any type of derby game that you would see in this division. These are 2 teams that do not like each other. And but it was Kalonji that came out ahead in this one. And it's a critical one because, again, Kalonji, they have 2 games in hand against their rivals, and they're already in that first place. So they absolutely are going to be the favorites to repeat as the division champions in the South. But Revolution is still right there, and we'll see that table later on. So this isn't the last time we're going to see these 2 play each other. So it's going to be interesting to see how this maps out for the rest of the season. Another game on the weekend, LSA Norcross Pro get their first win of the season, 4-3 win against Angeles. And this is, again, just like we talked about in the North Division, this is a critical win for LSA Norcross Pro. They were sitting on 0 points before this game, and now they're on 3, and it gives them a fighting chance at survival in the South Division. So really well done there. Angeles, some really booming goals for them as well. It was a game that we broadcast, of course, on ASMG. Take a look at it when you get an opportunity. We're going to have the extended highlights for that game as well. But some very choice goals from that match from both sides, and it's very entertaining to see. But Angeles looking to be safe in the division by the end of the season. But they drop points here, and so they're going to have to kind of tighten up and make sure that they're going to be safe with LSA. See if maybe Norcross Pro here is going to use this as a springboard to get to survival. So again, something to look forward to with both of these clubs. The last game that we'll consider, Augusta Arsenal, who won their game against UFA Lawrenceville. Good win for Augusta Arsenal as they seek a playoff spot in their first ever chance at that in the Premier Division. UFA Lawrenceville, solid mid-table team right now, looking to finish strongly. We'll see what their placement is in the league table. But again, I would think you would class their first season here in Premier as very successful. These are two manually promoted teams from last season, and they've done well for themselves so far, building a good foundation for their existence here in the Georgia South Division of the Georgia Conference. So very, very good result for them. So now we're going to want to look at the South table. And of course, we talked about Kalonji per profile. You just got to look at several things here. As amazing as the run was for Portros last season, I'm wondering if this run by Kalonji per profile is going to be even better, because you look at that goal difference there at 25. They've had one goal scored on them. I mean, it's a complete performance for them right now, sitting on 18 points. 2 games in hand over both FC Columbus and the Georgia Revolution, who are both on 16. It's going to take a minor miracle and a collapse by Kalonji not to repeat as division titles holders. So something very good for them to use as an incentive for the rest of the season. And there we see Augusta Arsenal with that victory, very valuable victory against Lawrenceville, solidifies a place in right now in the playoff spots. Again, the top 4 will qualify for postseason play in each of the North and the South divisions. And then, of course, the top spot, the winner of each one of the divisions will play a playoff, I'm going to call it a qualifier to go on to the national picture. So a lot of trophies to play for by these teams at the top of the league. And then, of course, we have Red Top SC. They're going to be fighting with their last 2 games to try to put themselves in a position to be in a playoff spot if they can take points off the teams ahead of them, on top of them. So it'll be interesting to see there. UFA Lawrenceville, safe mid-table there. But, still with 3 games to go, you got to watch out for a dip in form with teams like Angeles and UMA FC behind you. But LSA Norcross Pro, I talked about them, 3 games to go. That game gave them 3 points. It puts them in a position for survival as they play on. Now, UMA FC have some games to make up. There, you see they're only on 5 games. And so they have a lot of potential to move up the table with the games that they complete in hand. And so if they don't have that dip in form, UMA FC should be safe, but they do have to play the games. And LSA Norcross, they have all the incentive in the world to fight to get themselves out of that relegation spot. And this past weekend's victory will be a good incentive and motivator for them to continue on and try to find survival by the end of the season. So that really is a good look at both of the divisions in the Georgia Conference. And one of the best ways that you can keep up with the Georgia Conference in particular is by subscribing to ASMG on YouTube, or you can follow us on Rumble. We have both of those platforms where we cover the Georgia Conference in particular, but we're expanding coverage to other conferences as well. We just struck up a partnership with Granite City FC. This is a team that plays up in the Minnesota area in the Midwest West Conference. We're doing their men's and their women's team for the season, the spring season. So check it out there. If you hit that notification bell, you'll get notices of everything that we're doing. So it's not just live streaming, but we have podcasts throughout the week. This one, of course, the Back Pass, where we do a review of the Georgia Conference. We have a Division I check-in show where we cover both of the divisions in the Georgia Conference. And very exciting for us is the women's division, which started this past weekend. We have 6 teams competing in the Georgia Conference here for the women. And we're going to have a podcast specifically with them. We'll have interviews with the coaches and players from that division, and we'll keep up with that competition, which culminates in a nationwide playoff final in Irvine, California later this summer. So very exciting times here in the UPSL, a very compelling competition that's only getting better and more intense. And we're working to cover this as much as possible for the fans who are out there. So thank you for listening in, and we look forward to talking to you again after this weekend of games, and we'll see where everybody is in both of these divisions as it gets down to the nitty-gritty and towards the playoffs.